I'd like to welcome everyone to Crawford's roundtable discussion regarding remote claims management during the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Peggy Vasquez, and I'm the Director of Sales Operations for Crawford Claims Solutions in the United States. It's my pleasure to introduce our team of experts that will be discussing this topic today. On our panel today is Paul Boyer, the head of Crawford Claims Solutions in the UK. Paul has been with Crawford for 8 years. Meredith Brogan is the president of We Go Look and has been with Crawford for 6 years. Robert Simpson is the Senior Vice President of National Claims Operations in the United States for Crawford Claims Solutions and has been with Crawford for 30 years. Our moderator today is Ken Tolson. Ken is the U.S. President of Crawford Claims Solutions and has been with Crawford for 30 years. I'll now kick it off to Ken to start our discussion.
So thanks, Peggy. And I want to thank each of my colleagues for taking a few minutes out of your busy schedules to share some of your insight with our employees and our customers about what's going on in the world of COVID-19 and how it's affecting how we remotely manage claims in this day. Since March, we really saw the beginning of the sheltering movement in the U.S. and it really restricted our handling and the way we handled claims, and it's impacted everyone from our customers to our employees. Everyone's been touched by this. We really want to get your insight about what remote claims management means to you. And I'm going to kick it off with Robert. So Robert, when you think about the impact from a remote claims management standpoint, how has Crawford been involved in the remote claims management before COVID-19? What were the work streams you had in place and things you were working on before this ever came to be?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. As you well know, here in the U.S., Crawford had made many investments in remote claims management, virtual inspection space, well before COVID-19. And so we have many of the required tools already in place with a lot of integrations built in with various clients that have allowed us to do that. So the ability to complete virtual inspections in the U.S. is not new. What is certainly new since COVID-19 are the opportunities that have come up with various clients, and the demand has certainly accelerated.
And Meredith, what's your perspective?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Ken. Even before COVID-19, We Go Look has been an integral part of the remote claims management process. We Go Look provides a network of over 45,000 independent contractors. We actually call them lookers because they are eyes on the ground when you need them. Our lookers can quickly be dispatched in local areas to collect data or photos or even video related to a claim. Now, our lookers are not doing the work of an adjuster. They're simply capturing field data for the desk. They are on average located within 11 miles of an inspection site. We have very quick turnaround time. On average, it's within about 1.7 days. So this allows for the overall remote claims management process to continue in a very efficient manner. I also want to point out that prior to COVID-19, about a year ago, we launched a self-service app that we call You Go Look. You Go Look is it's incredibly simple, and it's a way for a policyholder to capture their own data. So if an individual is uncomfortable or if they simply want to speed up the claims management process, You Go Look is a great alternative, and it certainly supports the overall remote claims management process.
So let's stay with you, Meredith. I mean, what have you seen in terms of demand then in the COVID-19, the post-COVID-19 environment that we're in today? Have you seen demand go up, or is it about the same?
Yeah, so in terms of usage or demand, You Go Look, the orders placed have grown significantly. And in fact, in the months of March and April, we have seen an uptick by about 800% in terms of the numbers of You Go Look orders. So now more than ever, we're committed to our mission of restoring and enhancing lives, businesses, and communities. And our self-service app is really one way that we can deliver on that overall promise.
Got it. Hey, Robert, let's go to you. I mean, what have you seen from a demand standpoint since this event unfolded?
Yeah, there's no doubt that within the U.S. markets, we've definitely seen an accelerated interest and demand as clients seek new and innovative ways to continue to adjudicate claims, yet at the same time provide a safe environment for both their policyholders as well as their vendor partners. It's what you see is a lot of different clients have different levels of tolerance, but certainly the demand and the expectation and the willingness to listen to alternative inspection models has certainly accelerated throughout this COVID-19 event.
Well, we'll get to expectations from the customer in a few minutes, but Paul, what's your perspective from a demand change that you've seen? What have you witnessed?
Yeah, similar to Meredith and Robert, really. I mean, COVID is having a huge impact on demand for remote handling. In the UK, we remain in lockdown with strict social distancing rules. In over 90% of new claims, the customers indicated that they do not wish to meet with the adjuster physically, and they are requesting claim is progressed remotely. So our split for April has seen about 10% physical inspections, with 90% completed remotely, which is a huge swing from pre-COVID.
So Paul, let's stay with you then. Have you seen any increase or any different types of claims being submitted? What's the difference in the types and nature of claims that you're seeing in the UK?
So, Ken, in answer to your question, yes, we've seen a big increase in business interruption claims received from our key clients, and we're also working with our clients to provide technical input and advice as they look to consider their own liability in the light of relevant case law. In addition, Ken, to significant spike in BI claims, we've now started to receive a small number of employers' liability claims. These are claims where the employee has become seriously ill with COVID-19 and is suggesting adequate steps to safeguard were not taken by the employer. So we'll see how this plays out within the UK market.
And so, Robert, from a U.S. perspective, what are you seeing in terms of new types of claims or variation in sort of the risk profile out there?
Yeah, and it's interesting because in the U.S. market, we were already handling a lot of low severity, high frequency type claims through these types of models. And what we have seen is more of a willingness for our clients to expand that, to include more perils, to include more complex losses. The decision tree we used to make when we would triage a new FNOL was more based on the severity and whether or not we could handle it in a virtual inspection model. And in today's world, it's more along the lines, is it safe to do a physical inspection? And we haven't seen a lot of limitations on the complexity or severity of the loss. A much more open and willingness of the clients to entertain that as an option. Like Paul, we've seen certainly seen an uptick of business interruption type claims, but one of the things that we probably might come as a little bit of a surprise is a lot more commercial type losses. Commercial inspections are being channeled into this type of virtual and remote inspection model.
Got it. So Meredith, you mentioned a huge uptick or 800% uptick on your self-service and YouGo Look product itself, but on the WeGo Look side, where you're still affecting those looks by your 46,000 lookers, are you seeing any difference in the types of looks that you're performing?
We are, in fact, very much in line with what Robert and Paul just mentioned. We've had an uptick in the business interruption claims as well. For example, if validation is needed on whether a company is still open for business, we can quickly dispatch a looker to obtain verification. In fact, we have one client who has over 2,000 customers operating restaurants. They're operating in all areas of the United States. So due to our vast coverage, we're able to send lookers very quickly to the restaurant sites to see if they're still open for business. Do they have reduced hours? Is the dining area open? Or are they only allowing curbside pickup and delivery services? It actually reminds me a lot of some work that we did several years ago related to Hurricane Maria. We did some business interruption validation work, and this was on commercial properties where we were checking to see if the operations had electricity or if they were using some type of generator. Through this process and through this assignment, we actually discovered that there was a fraud rate for this particular case of around 67%. So there is absolute value in this type of validation service.
So a lot of dialogue so far on sort of the environment of COVID-19 or the environment that COVID-19 has created. But let's get down into the weeds a little bit from what is remote claims management? Let's get a little bit more specific. So Robert, I'm going to start with you. I mean, when you look at your claims inventory today and you're deciding which claims require on-site versus which claims can be virtually handled, how do you make that call?
Yeah, Ken, there's a lot of effort that goes into, and I would break this down into two segments, both pre-COVID-19 and post-COVID-19. In the pre-COVID-19 world, we did a lot of, at FNOL, we would triage losses. We would try to determine based on severity, location, complexity of loss, the type of damage, what might fit into a remote claims environment that could effectively be handled by a desk adjuster. Obviously, in the post-COVID environment, that has expanded quite a bit. And in the U.S., we were very quick to engage in a process to try and pre-screen losses. Obviously, part of that was to determine the safety and what risk might be involved from completing a site inspection. But we also are able to triage during that communication with the homeowner. We also have utilized Meredith's You Go Look application to try and identify early on, secure photographs early on of a potential damage or exposure. And based on that, we're able to make recommendations to our client partners. At the end of the day, before COVID-19, we were probably limited on what our client partners would be open to handling remotely. In a post-COVID-19, I haven't seen very many limitations at all. And so there is absolutely a willingness to expand that, whether that be in commercial, whether that be in more complex or losses that we before would have never dreamed they would allow for a non-field inspection to take place.
Yeah, certainly more requests now seeking ways to make it virtual as opposed to on-site inspection. So Paul, what do you actually do when you can't go on site, which sounds like most of the time for you? How do you actually handle that claim? What's different? What's different about a virtually handled remote managed claim versus an on-site?
Yeah, sure, Ken. So the core process for remote handling is the same as a physical inspection. So the first step is to agree how the customer wants to interact with us. So we will offer various media, You Go Look, Crawford Live, or the customer's own media part of the adjustment. Then we carry out a full suitability scope schedule and a full site note report, just as we would following a physical inspection. If there's any extensive damage or reinstatement works, we are using our own in-house surveying team, and they are providing a desktop validation service, which is helping in the costing exercise. Just the same as with a physical inspection, we're linked in with contractor connections, where they can carry out work safely. They are, and any emergency works. So all the claims are progressing through remote handling. The providers can, with additional reassurance. In property, we audited over 100 claims in April. Focus of the audit was very much on the technical decision making, and I'm pleased to say that the results of the quality audit are the same as what we will complete, and the similar scores in business as usual for any physical inspections.
So Robert, what's the U.S. perspective in terms of, what do you specifically do in the U.S. to handle a claim remotely when you can't go on site?
Yeah, well, in the U.S., it all starts with that F&OL and that review of the details surrounding the loss. We try to make a determination as best we can on scope, damages, complexity. We will make contact with the homeowner or site personnel to try and get an understanding of what we're talking about. If we're talking about interior only damage, exterior, or both, so that we can then determine what type of resource is best suited to assist us in the adjudication of that particular loss. And then it's a matter of working with partners, whether that's with WeGoLook or implementing the YouGoLook application. Maybe it's one of our ladder assist companies if it's a roofing type loss. And quite honestly, if it's depending on the severity and the complexity of the loss, we might be able to have real-time connectivity with someone at the site or with one of these third-party providers at the site to go through and essentially remotely do a scope. And then it's a licensed adjuster who is working at a desk who can then take that information, that scope information, measurements, damages, and write an estimate, much the same they would if they were actually on site.
So interesting. I'd like to invite each of you to maybe share a success story from the past few months, something that's worked well or some insight you've gained from an interaction between an adjuster and a customer or a policyholder. And let's start with you, Meredith.
Sure. So one thing that I didn't mention earlier is that the fact that we have so many lookers, the 45,000 lookers, they are local. So they are able to get to a site very, very quickly. One benefit during this period of time is the lack of travel. We all know that the traveling from one location to the next could expose individuals to additional risk. So by having people that are local, we have received many compliments from customers saying that they're so appreciative that we're still able to move a claim forward by having people in their local areas. I do want to go back though from a success story perspective and talk a little bit more about YouGoLook. I didn't mention earlier, but it's customizable. So it really is there to meet the individual needs of the client. So one success story is that we've had an insurance provider who implemented YouGoLook within their homeowner renewal process. The adoption of the app was so significant that apparently it touched about 63% of all of their renewal orders. And of those, 56% actually turned their information back or responded to the YouGoLook app within 24 hours. So that sped up their entire process, and it helped them recognize some cost savings. So policyholders at the end of that process actually voiced their appreciation for the mobile app.
Good, good. So Paul, what's your success story?
Yeah, I think we've had a few, and probably the most notable is through April, we've seen over a 30% reduction in complaint numbers. So our customer service and the customer experience has significantly improved, and that is definitely down to the remote handling that we've implemented. So we're really pleased about that. In terms of speed, we tested, trained and implemented our live stream capabilities through Crawford Live within 1 week post COVID. That's again another success. In terms of the virtual adjuster that we've spoken about, we've defined the product. The project is initiated, and we're about to go live on the 15th of May. And I guess finally, Ken, in and amongst all of the change and the challenge, we've created opportunities, and we're now receiving and dealing with claims from our customers that we would not normally receive. So we're very pleased about that.
That's good to hear. So Robert, what's the U.S. perspective? What's your U.S. success story that you've been most proud to share?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's quite a few of them, and I love the fact that we've been able to adapt and take technology that we already had in place and be able to expand on that and meet a growing demand that has certainly accelerated throughout the pandemic. A couple of examples: we had a storm loss with some water intrusion, and so there was a leak, an active leak within the home. When we went through and we did our screening calls, while there was no necessarily anyone that had an exposure, there was some at-risk folks, elderly folks that were living and staying in the home, and they just weren't comfortable with having someone from the outside come in and do it. We were able to then link up with, they had a high school, I think he was a senior in high school, who was able to, felt very comfortable. We were able to provide some technology to, and via ClaimX, we were able to connect that adjuster up with a desk adjuster and do it at the same time. And so we were able to walk through that high school senior through, showing him the damage, showing the information, telling him where to go and how to go about making sure that they had the right measurements. And from that, we had a same day, we had an estimate in the hands of our client that same day. And so it all fell together, but you could tell that the homeowner was very appreciative that we didn't put their elderly relatives at risk, and we were able to address the needs of the claim expeditiously.
Yeah, that's a great example and a great tie-in to my last question for all three of you, which is we're starting to see more and more cities begin to open up, gradually removing some of the shelter-in-place orders. We're really starting to see, people wanting to get back to a sense of normal. What do you suspect will happen, or how do you see that unfolding? What does that post-COVID-19 environment look like for you and your team in the UK?
So Ken, in terms of the UK marketplace, similar to the US, I think we're well on the way to demonstrate that we can handle property claims, the right technology tools remotely. I think it's too early to say yet, but it could be over time. 50% of our intake will be done by physical inspection and 50% remotely. Certainly remote adjusting will penetrate the lower value claims up to say £20,000 in value. So I think that is something that is really exciting for us here in the UK.
So Meredith, what's your perspective from the We Go Look group and the gig economy world? What's the post-COVID-19 environment look like to you?
Yeah, so it's certainly difficult to determine what the post-pandemic new normal will look like. I can tell you we have certainly seen a shift in our portfolio of assignments. I mentioned earlier business interruption. We also have drone capabilities. We have over 2,000 licensed drones operators, and this is an area that we've seen more piqued interest in because it's a tool that doesn't require direct human contact. So I anticipate that there will continue to be demand for these other types of services even in the longer term.
And Robert, over to you. I mean, from a U.S. perspective, you see probably the most varied approach now as we see here in the U.S. in terms of opening back up. It seems to be really, regionalized. What's your perspective on the post-COVID-19 for the U.S. adjusting team?
Yeah, I think there's a ton, Ken, that we simply do not know yet. It's so as you mentioned, it's so varied from state to state, region to region, and in some cases county to county. I know that there is an interest and a desire throughout the country to get back to normal and to continue to do things the way they used to be. I also think, though, that we're kidding ourselves if we think that there won't be changes. The changes that come out of this are a result of more of a willingness, carriers, clients, and other providers had to find alternative ways to handle and adjudicate claims. And I don't think that that's going to change. I think that, there'll be a segment that will fully embrace it. There'll be some more traditionalists. But at the end of the day, I think that there is absolutely an ongoing need for someone like Crawford, who can provide, a variety of solutions and with our partners. And so I think there's a lot yet we don't know when it comes to what it's going to look like and how quickly it's going to return to normal.
So I can't thank each of you enough. I want to thank you as colleagues, but also taking a leadership role in the industry of trying to help navigate this, which is uncharted waters from a timeline standpoint for me and the industry. But thanks to each of you, and thank you for your time, and thank you to all who listened. Thank you.